Greetings and welcome back to yet another episode of the Daily Run, and today we're playing as Apollyon. We're starting out with Mom's Brine, our very first treasure room, and that would be an okay item to suck up in most cases. It doesn't have that much of an effect. Obviously Mom's Brine is one of those very ineffective items. It's good if maybe enemies are chasing you and you use it to disperse them and they kind of go away just to apply that fear, but overall it's not that significant, and I decided not to suck it up because this is a first floor, so maybe my boss will drop something that I would much rather suck up, maybe a better active item or maybe just a passive item, because I would much rather have some random stats as opposed to having the active item of Mom's Brine in this situation. So I decided to leave it behind, and later on I just kind of thought about it and figured it's probably not even worth my time to go back and suck the Mom's Bra up, just because I'm so behind the schedule, because I was trying to fight the Ragman. It was a champion version who spawns more spiders, and then spiders of course have a million HP. And not only that, he also does that attack where he heals himself up, and it's just an uncomfortable situation. So I just decided I'm gonna leave Mom's Jar behind because it really has no effect on me. It's probably not gonna have effect on the run as a whole, even though maybe it would save me from like 1 or 2 hits of damage in total on this run. But still, with how bad this run was, I really feel like that wouldn't make too much of a difference. So I feel like I made the right decision, at least in this case. But okay, we did come to the second floor. We did beat that champion Ragman. Luckily, or maybe not luckily, somehow I managed not to get hit even once. I would say that's maybe more of a stroke of luck than necessarily skilled play, but there's definitely some element of skill to it, because you have to know how to manage and fighting the spiders off as possible. You try to keep them to a minimum, so you should never just, with this particular champion version, I'll give you some tips on how I deal with him. You should never just fight the spiders, because if you just fight the spiders, he's gonna spawn more of them than you can handle, and that's gonna be really problematic. What you kinda have to hope for are some lucky RNG rolls, so that when he does spawn a spider, he spawns 1 or 2 at most. If he spawns 3 of them, it's pretty much over, because he's just gonna keep doing it again, and you really won't have enough damage to deal with all of those. But as soon as he spawns 1 spider, and there's only like maximum 2 spiders on the screen, you can afford that time to actually hit the Ragman himself and deal damage that way. Obviously it's also good when he rolls his head, because then you can damage the head and the spider at the same time when it spawns, so that's probably the ideal outcome. But sometimes he's gonna spam his healing attack, which spawns a random amount of spiders, and that can be really problematic to deal with. So you should always kill spiders when there's like 3 of them, to try to minimize them to 2, and then focus on Ragman himself, because otherwise you're just not gonna get through him, especially with all the healing and all the spiders that he does. Luckily, I think his overall HP did get nerfed in a patch, like in Afterbirth Plus. That's also when the champion version was introduced, but he's a nasty one. Fighting him on the first floor with basically no damage ups is probably one of the slowest things that you can do, and it really does require more patience than anything else. It's not about how well you can dodge, it's not about how well you know his patterns, it's just about staying at the distance, just picking up good shots where to shoot from, just dodging in the right direction, of course not letting those spiders jump into you, which is probably the biggest worry there. But once you get through it, he's not that big of a deal, and like in this case I told you, I managed to kill him without getting hit once. Again, I know that's maybe more of a lucky streak, just for the fact that he didn't spawn more spiders, but still I feel like it was he's manageable. Even if he's a bit annoying and tedious to fight, he's a boss that you can deal with quite efficiently once you actually get used to it. And once we got through that, then of course I was in a position where I just had so much time behind me, and I was at the 4th minute after leaving my first floor, so I realized that this is probably not gonna be a run where I'm gonna make boss rush again, and I hope that maybe I would make it too harsh. But of course, with how cruel the RNG is in Isaac, all of the floors were giant, and I don't know if it's just me. Maybe I'm drunk, maybe something happened to me, but I feel like the floors are huge in a lot of cases. Whenever I feel like you have to get somewhere really fast, somehow the floor generation generates these giant, massive floors, and it just takes 10 minutes to explore them in full. And the fact I finished, I think, depths 1 at 25 minutes in this particular case. Of course, some of that is due to Curse of the Lost, so obviously I don't really know where I'm going, it just takes a lot of time. But even with that, I'm not sure how people manage to get to boss rush and hush in some cases. I'm really in awe of just how skilled people are at the game, and maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm doing something wrong, but I feel like I'm playing really slowly overall, and because of that I'm missing some of the more important objectives. In this particular case, I even try to use the Void as not offensively, but I tried to suck up as many passive items so I would get those stats up. If I saw a passive item which wouldn't give me a stats upgrade, I always sucked it up just in hopes that maybe it would give me a tear delay or maybe a damage up, and you do get those, but they're just not that significant. And what's maybe even worse is it doesn't help that you have a lot of damage and a hard tear rate when your shot speed is high, because what happens when you have a lot of shot speed? First of all, your tears travel very fast, which means that you have to be more perpendicular to the enemy as you're trying to actually shoot and kill them. And once that happens, of course, you're more in the line of fire or of most enemies when they shoot back. And that's not the only problem. The problem is also because your shot speed is so high, you knock them back much further than you would with regular tears. And because of that, it's much harder to let the second shot on top of that, because usually they bounce to the left or maybe to the right, and because they can shoot pretty much in a straight line, it's quite hard to predict, or at least it's hard to predict with so many different enemies, and everyone has a different coefficient of friction, and they get bounced around differently. But once you get used to it, I mean, even if you get used to it, it still requires more precision than if you just had a low shot speed, and for that reason it's just much harder to hit. So even though you do get a shot speed upgrade and a damage upgrade, I would still wager that it's a DPS downgrade in most cases. It depends obviously on which enemies you're fighting. If you're fighting the bosses, it's not that big of a deal. Maybe it's even beneficial to have a high shot speed, but just as you're clearing the rooms and you're trying to be precise with your shots, then I think it actually matters a lot. And for that reason, I feel like the shot speed, I'm really not a fan of it. And the fact that it increased 5 times in total pretty much defines that this is one of the most hellish runs for me. I definitely think that overall, this is the daily which I've enjoyed the least. Even if it does go to the cathedral, even if it does have all of these crazy items and combos that you might get with it, I mean, at this point I only have 8 items, so it's not that crazy, but it just wasn't fun. And the fact that it was such a high shot speed with basically no damage, and so many rooms and enemies with layouts that are just inherently unfair, and you just take so much damage for no reason. And it's not the only instance of where this happened. I mean, I like Isaac, obviously, I play the game, but as soon when you enter a small angel room and you know that you have to fight the angel to get those points, or maybe when you enter a devil deal which is small and has Krampus in it, you can just kiss your damage penalty goodbye, because you're gonna get hit. There's nothing you can do about it. There's just some room variations which you have no control over, and it sucks, because I think that even in bad dailies, I mean especially in bad dailies, it's important that the player has some audacity. So whenever you get hit in a bad run, I feel like you should be the one who's responsible. I feel like there should be a way for you to compensate for damage. If you have a strong run and maybe you encounter a strong room which maybe damages you, that's okay. I feel like that's much more manageable and much less stressful than if you're in a bad daily and you keep walking into rooms, not just one, but like 10 of them, or maybe in a row or whatever, with enemies which just get you and there's nothing you can do about it, or maybe an enemy spawns right on top of you, and while you know that you could have predicted that, and you know that maybe the stain in this particular case spawns enemies below him, like obviously when you think about it, maybe you would realize that that's something that happens, but it just never comes into play unless you're in a very bad run. Usually you just deal with those silkworms in 1 or 2 shots, but obviously when you're in a bad run, there's just more to deal with, and it spawns on top of you and just take damage, and you know it's your fault, but at the same time, it's kinda not unfair, but it's kind of different with just how the whole landscape of the game changes when you actually don't have enough damage and DPS to sustain yourself as you're going through the floors. Maybe it's an interesting experience. In some cases it is, but just because there have been quite a few bad dailies in a row now, I just feel like maybe there's something that needs to be addressed here, or changed at least, just to make it a bit more palatable. But it is what it is. I really can't complain too much about it. After all, this is Isaac. We're kind of used to having the shitty dice rolls. This is what Isaac is supposed to be. But then again, I don't think that necessarily stops us from complaining. I don't mind hard runs, don't get me wrong, but just this particular one I really didn't enjoy. I think the majority of that was just with my mind state. Obviously, some days you feel maybe a bit better, some days you feel a bit worse, and this is just one of those days where I just hoped for a fun, strong run, but it just didn't turn out that way. And anyway, we are entering the Isaac fight here, and I think this Isaac fight just goes to show just how annoying it really can be to fight enemies with the high shot speed. It's not even the first phase or the second phase, because he's obviously stationary, but after the third phase, when he starts flying around and just shooting tears around him, that's when it becomes really, really annoying. And I hope that's, I mean, I don't hope anything. I hope it doesn't change. I feel like the complaining part is a part of every hard game in some sense, just saying, okay, you know, this is a bit unfair. And I like it that way, even though it sounds very masochistic, and it kind of is. I like when things are difficult, and maybe even for the wrong reasons. And it doesn't feel good every single time, but overall, I feel like it makes for a much deeper and a much more interesting experience that we all go through. And while it might not be the best game design, it might not be fair, it might not even be fun in some cases. I still feel like it's something that defines Isaac as it is, and to have it removed or at least changed to a degree where it wouldn't be recognizable anymore, I feel like that would be a shame and Isaac would lose a lot of his charm. But still, like I said, I don't think that stops us from complaining, and it shouldn't, because I feel like if there are problems in the game, they should be addressed, but obviously it's up to the developers to decide, okay, this is my vision of the game, this is where I feel like maybe the community is right, and this is my vision of the game where I feel like it should be intentionally difficult sometimes, and this is where I disagree. And obviously, I think we all trust Edmund and the team to make the right decisions for the game as they come. Obviously, this is not meant to be a rant or like a hate speech against anyone who's making the game. I feel like they've made an excellent job. Obviously, I've played this game for like 700 hours, so I have nothing bad to say about it. I'm just trying to say that this particular run wasn't very enjoyable for me, and for that reason, I didn't even decide to explore the rest of the floor. I just picked up the trophy and I just went out as soon as possible. I hope you enjoyed this one, guys, and I hope to see you next time.